So, folks, with the Euros just around the corner, I did want to do a quick close off of Arsenal season 23-24. I have to say it's going to be in relatively positive terms, especially when you're laying out the simple facts that this is a team that scored the second highest points total for the club since the Invincibles. In terms of their actual league performance, then they were right up until the end the number one goal scorers in the league, by far the best defense with 19 clean sheets. That despite, in my opinion, having a very underwhelming, subpar goalkeeper in David Raya. Champions League wise, it was many years away from the competition, but they went out to somebody who's won the competition multiple times, came within minutes of beating the eventual winners as well. FA Cup, a little bit of a disappointment losing to Liverpool at home, especially in a game that they dominated. But it is against an absolute top three rival that was running them close in the league up until some weeks to the end. So overall, a very successful season with some hints of regret, particularly in the month of April. And what they showed was that there's really a natural progression from what they did in 22-23. And if this group can stay together, carry on evolving, then hopefully they're quite far from still reaching their ceiling. It's a good idea to quickly jump back to the 22-23 season just to make some observations that carried through to the 23-24 season. I think we'll all have memories of a very young Arsenal team really tearing it up in the league. That exuberance of youth is looking to carry them all the way through to the final. And I thought at some moments it really looked like they were going to make it all the way. That goal by Reece Nelson in the 90s, I think it was 97th minute against Bournemouth, really looked like all the signs were pointing in the right direction. But they hit the wall, not in an unbelievably surprising way with such a young team and such a small squad at that period of time. But yeah, April was quite devastating. They had 4 Premier League matches, 3 of them away, and especially the one that was against Manchester City, who was, of course, in direct battle for the top spot. They didn't take a single victory in that month, which was quite devastating, especially considering that 3 of the matches they were in, pretty much they should have won, and definitely in 2 of them they were leading by a couple of goals as well. So there's been quite some commentary on what happened at that time. I think some of the obvious ones are really around, we had a core group of players who in the end felt that pressure at that moment. It's normal that you have that small group. It wasn't, I would say, expected that they would make, or they would mount such a challenge for the title last season. So the group was probably not tailored and built for that scenario. The pressure of Manchester City, who's been there so often, have such a strength in depth, winner's mentality. They had the momentum as they were powering towards their own treble as well. Also, of course, played a huge role. But I think from a squad and tactical perspective, there's probably 2 call-outs. One is around William Saliba, of course, who was enjoying an amazing debut season. That's really testament to the way that Arteta has developed him, putting him on loan, getting him full season's experience of playing in a top-flight level, and so that he was ready for the Premier League, not just coming in and out, mistakes and that sort of thing, but really being ready from day one to make his mark in the Premier League and having a stunning season. So dropping out at that exact moment was very costly. Normally, Arteta would then put across, I think, Ben White into that centre-back position and have Tomiyasu into the right-back position. But Tomiyasu was also injured, which is probably something that gets overlooked. So I think he thought, okay, let's not complicate this too much. We'll keep the 3 pieces in that back line as it is, but put Rob Holding in as a direct replacement for Saliba. Unfortunately, he's not to that same quality, and I think in general with Arsenal, he's met his ceiling, which has been shown otherwise. It was somebody that I had some high hopes for in terms of being that sort of leader at the back, reading the play and being in the right place at the right time, despite not really having the physical speed to be very mobile for those certain attackers, and then partnered with the right centre back, sort of like a Koscielny Mertesacker setup. You could see some sort of options for him in that squad. But that proved to be very costly in the month of April, one of our worst defensive months, where we shipped 2, 4, 7, 11 goals in 4 games, which is really quite devastating. That's one, and that's been talked about quite a few times. But I think the second part, which is not referred to quite a lot, is the role of Gabriel Jesus and Leandro Trossard in that team at that moment. So Gabriel Jesus obviously had a great stunning start to the season. His energy was very infectious in that dressing room and in the squad and the way we were playing. Very unpredictable player, but I think they had built up something, a good understanding at the start of that season that set the tone for the rest of that campaign. He did, of course, get injured in the typical Gabriel Jesus way. And then that period of time, Leandro Trossard came into the club. Somebody who's extremely versatile, very technical, has a good brain. He's come from the Genk Academy, which is the same academy that Kevin De Bruyne and Thibaut Courtois are from. So two legit world's best. They could be in a best 11 team. Was the type of competition that he was around in that environment at Genk when he came through. So he came into that position to deputize for Jesus. Did a fantastic job, both in terms of goals, but I think in terms of the relationships and the style that we were playing, the performances we were putting out. They had a lot of control in the matches. And when Jesus came back straight in and Leandro out, then we seemed to lose that. And you could see that in the performances, that even if we scored some goals, our performances were not very strong. We were probably lucky to actually get away with a point in both the Liverpool and the West Ham game, which we were leading by 2 goals in both of them, but finishing very, very, on the edge. So that's really a shame, probably not talked about a lot, but I think it's probably something that Arteta considered in the future, that, on paper, this is probably the wise thing to put your striker back in, but maybe it's not the right thing for the team. So I think a couple of things that stuck in his mind after that season, which was, number one, unsurprising, around the topic of leadership and maturity. That's something that, of course, takes time and will need to be built. But are there some ways of bringing that type of profile into the changing room through the transfers? With Xhaka leaving, then Declan Rice was an obvious target. They were clear from the off that he was their preferred option for that midfield position, especially with his leadership campaigns with West Ham, and they went after him. He wanted to come as well. That they made that deal happen, even if at the time it seemed quite an expensive purchase. Even someone like Kai Havertz was somebody who fits into that bracket as well. Of course, he's not as old as everybody you would typically expect as a seasoned campaigner, but he has been around the block quite a bit. He's played for Germany many times. He's been in a Champions League final. He scored in that final as they won the title. So, he knows the ins and outs of football as well. So he could also be a complementary personality in that dressing room, especially when you add, a Zinchenko and a Jesus and their experience at Manchester City as well. So hopefully that's something that brings the team along in terms of their spirit and maturity in the dressing room. The second conclusion, which is really around options from Mikel Arteta, is how much he loves them. I think he saw, especially with that Man City game, that he needs to have some flexibility in the way that he approaches matches. Different scenarios will need to take place depending on the opposition, depending on the competition as well. So options are really super key for him. The way that he deploys players will be important, and having players who are flexible and adaptable enough will be absolutely key. And we've seen that with players that he's bought in the past, but that he continued to buy in that summer period. So Havertz is a classic example. Timber is also another one who, depending on what you see, what you read, he's either a centre back, a right back, a left back, a centre midfield, all of these type of options. But he has a general, hopefully, football understanding and athletic ability that allows him to transition into those different positions quite easily. So that's the 2 things I think Arteta took when he thinking about the 23-24 season. So if we jump back or forward to the 23-24 season, actually the story of the season is pretty simple. It turned out to be, how can Arteta put Kai Havertz into that team? Seems to have a lot of affection for what he brings, for me mainly in terms of his versatility, but it turned out that this seemed to be the main mission, as he found a home in the attacking midfield area, but not really clicking for the majority of the season, and then of course ended the season up front. But if we quickly go through the different pieces, so in terms of transfers, unfortunately Timber was injured, I think in that first game, playing at left back, which probably was a signal for how that could have played out for the rest of the season. Declan Rice was relatively straightforward, with Xhaka out, Declan Rice in. Of course, he started the season in a more defensive way, very natural, and then of course as the season went on became more progressive. So very high hopes in terms of him contributing more from an attacking perspective, scoring goals, etc., looking to the new campaign. I think overall, with that price tag over his head now, people are very satisfied with what he's brought to the team and the squad in general. If we then take the striking position or the attacking positions, yeah, classic scenario. So I think Gabriel Jesus starting the season, getting injured, Leandro Trossard coming into that role for some parts, Nketiah also coming in for some parts. Gabriel Jesus coming back in from injury. None of it was really taking off in a very wild way. And of course, we ended the season with Kai Havertz in that position. So, just a couple of words on Gabriel Jesus. I think, as a personality and as a purchase for starting off this project of Arteta, it was actually quite a good one. Knowing his background at Man City, obviously there must have been good relationship between the two behind the scenes from Mikel's time there. As a player, I find him very frustrating and one that, because of his attributes, not one that you can really count on as a number one option within your team. So when it's going well, which I would say is in 25% of the cases, then he's a bag of energy that sets the tone for the rest of the team. He can be a nightmare for the opposition, closing them down at the right moments, and he's very instinctive, so he is capable of those little, those quality moments when the opportunity presents itself. You don't have time to think, boom, can often be very effective like that. However, the whole antithesis of this is the fact that I don't find him, delivering on that front on very often. So 75% of the time, that unpredictability is not an asset. So he's making, he's trying to run around, trying to close down, but at the wrong moments, it then leads to the team being out of shape. When he has time to think, then occasionally he can make the wrong options or take the wrong option. So it's very difficult to plan around a striker like this consistently over the course of a season. However, those positivities, hopefully the mentality he brings, as well as his versatility, being able to play across the front line is, of course, an asset for the squad. Kai Havertz, and that scenario, the way we finished off at the end of the season, I know that it's got a lot of positivity around it, and I want to be positive that it's, for me, making the best of what was a difficult situation. So he's very versatile, and he has a good relationship with Trossard, especially on the left, who took out Martinelli, and we'll come to Martinelli in a second, and helping to bring the whole team together in terms of their flow. But as an individual and in general, I think there's far more to come with somebody else in that role. Is this the best that we can do? I don't think so. I think this type of scenario is always something that you do in a temporary moment, or a crisis moment, or when there's no alternatives. To consistently plan on having basically a whole bunch of players whose goal, whose mentality, whose role, whose objective is not to score goals, and asking them to score goals is very hard to bring consistency to the table. So I think it should be something definitely of a focus area going forward. Incidentally, I do think that this is going to be the way that Germany also plays in the Euros coming up. So Havertz will play that number 9 role exactly in the same way. It seems that in world football, and I think this is really the case, that there is a dearth of real quality strikers. Used to have a time when they were just littered at every club. Now I think it's quite difficult. Not littered at every club, but several at every club as well. Now I think it's really trying to find the ones that are the next stars, next star strikers. If you take Germany, for example, it's really strange not to see them going with a figurehead spearheading the campaign. This is a country that had Müller, Rummenigge, Rudi Voller, Klinsmann, Klose many times, and you could already see the difficulties when they had to call back Klose for I think it was for the World Cup 2014. So yeah, this seems to be a phase that we're going through in world football. So it is, like I said, the best of a bad situation. If we then go back throughout the team as well, it's better probably to do left and right. So from a right side perspective, super strong for Arsenal, remains their key outlet with that wide Odegaard-Saka relationship. The amount of overload we create on that side is really stunning. The amount of cutbacks that led to goals as well on that side is really, really frightening. Saka, Odegaard, White, all carrying on in great way from the previous season. I think Saka, of course, this is a perennial topic, but managing him in terms of workload and in terms of injury, a potential injury, is going to be a key priority. So having different options on that right side will be, I think, something that Arteta needs to think about. Odegaard stepping up even more now, really bringing that consistency into his game. So not just some nice moments, but really running games. He has that really super cool Northern Europe economic style. So there's literally no wastage in what he does. It's really great to see him make that forward step from the previous season. Left side, however, far more of an issue. It's funny because I was thinking back over the season and I said, don't think Martinelli played that much. Must have been injured or. But it's not the case. He played more than, I think, 35, 36 games throughout the campaign, but it's just a disappointing one that, it didn't really result in him, delivering too much, and then getting supplanted by Trossard towards the end of the season. So something that needs to be thought about. I think in general the flanks, as this, looking for squad depth. Martinelli, I always thought from when he came through would be an ideal centre forward. That directness, I always think about, of course, the Chelsea goal he scores away where he just literally runs the whole length of the pitch. So that directness and that, I think he has a very cool under pressure when it comes to finishing as well. On the wing, maybe he's a bit too. It could come across a bit too limited in terms of what he adds, especially at the moment where we play with wingers who are cutting infield and getting involved in the play. Maybe it's not really ideal for him. I don't know if it's part of the overall development of the player, bringing him out to the wing so that he can learn another facet of the game before then looking to put him into the centre. I'm not sure. What we did observe with Martinelli towards the end of the season, the last game where he was playing on the right, and therefore you're not cutting in, you're going to the byline and crossing it in, is that just to show another option for the right side? I hope so. Also maybe within game and within the season as well, those could be options where you're switching both Saka and Martinelli on the flanks. Zinchenko, left back, also problematic. I think as a player though, I think he's one that can get it right, but from an attacking standpoint, it's always very effective as he moves into midfield and you have that additional body there. But obviously, it leaves itself, when you don't get that balance right, it leaves itself to being vulnerable on the counter attack in that left back position. So we had Kiowar coming in, and then Tomiyasu, who finished the season in that position. So yeah, one to think about. I think it's one that they will continue to look at, internally to solve that rather than external transfer. I think you have enough bodies there to find a solution, and I think Zinchenko has it in him to try and get that balance in his game as well. I do think he's a real, very useful talent and asset in the squad. The defense in general, super, really delivering all the way through as a unit. If we just park that left back position, but the rest, the remaining three, absolutely fantastic. Ben White continues to get stronger in that right back position, and the Saliba Gabriel unit really works well together. I think there was an interesting moment at the start of the season when Gabriel was out of the team, Ben White in the centre. I think Partey was even playing right back, as there was speculation around the future of Gabriel, but I'm glad that it's all come together, and hopefully that partnership in the centre continues going into the next season. Last bit around some of the other peripheral players, and Thomas Partey is probably the most frustrating of the lot. You see that in the ideal scenario, you will have Declan Rice, Partey, and Odegaard, that triangle, but he just doesn't stay fit enough. It did come back into the team towards the end of the season, but there will be question marks around him. He has just 1 year left on his contract, so it's something to think about. Even though fully fit, I think he would be definitely a starter in that first team. Overall, like I mentioned before, the last game of the season, Martinelli was on the right side, so something to watch out for. And Timber also made his return, and he was at right back. I think it was just, let's get him back playing in a comfortable position. But in pre-season will be interesting to see if he moves across to the left, or if he is indeed an option for that central midfield position, as a potential option for if Partey is let go. In the season as a whole, pretty much season of two halves, and that second half was really, really stunning performance. But again, April was very costly, so Bayern sandwiching a match with Aston Villa, and we didn't win any of those games, unfortunately. And I think that's where that point around, Havertz up front and having somebody not being able to unlock in terms of goals really cost us. I think we lacked inspiration in those matches. There was a moment in the Villa match where we were on top, had chances to score, but after going behind, we just didn't have it in us to respond in that right way. So I think overall, as priorities, there will be an attacking solution, for me at least, an attacking solution that needs to be found. Ideally, somebody who creates a bit of magic. Either that's someone separate as a flank player or an attacking midfielder player, or somebody you want that included as a striker. Left back position, I think, will take care of itself. But yeah, overall, I think those are going to be the priorities for Arteta in terms of the transfers going forward. It will depend. Normally, this is the obvious one, but Arteta has his own way. So what I would do is different to what he probably will do. and definitely the team that starts the season will not be the team that finishes the season as well. So I think who we let go is going to be crucial. Partey, I mentioned, he's got 1 year on his contract. I think what's going to be important is that they do need to look as a club to recoup money from transfers. It was outstanding to build his project that they let go, for example, a Pepe, an Ozil, a Lacazette, an Aubameyang basically cut them. That's all record signings for the club. It's more than 250 million just to get started on, or just to reboot, the entire dressing room. But at some point, you need to get money back in. So that means I think it will force the hand of some signings or some transfers being made. I see, unfortunately, some of the English boys going. Nelson, Ramsdale, of course, potentially Smith Rowe, who's a player I really like. I think he should be in direct competition with Odegaard in terms of the squad. But they're all going to be thinking about the time that they need to be playing. So there could be loan moves made there or permanent transfers if they do need to get some money in and they get a good offer. Fabio Vieira, another interesting one in terms of how he's dropped off the radar. Again, could be a loan move or if he has a great pre-season, could be someone that's jettisoned in as an option in terms of the attacking options that we have. So overall I think there's quite some work to be done. We'll think about some of these solutions in terms of transfers as the Euros progress, who are some interesting targets as well, and as we get closer to the season. But overall, tremendous success from Arteta. I'm curious to see what some of the moves are. I'm very, very curious to see some of the pre-season matches, which will be taking place in the US. I think they have, is it Liverpool, another Premier League team, might be Man United, or am I confusing that? They played Man United last season for sure, and I think it was in the New York Giants arena, so in the MetLife. But we'll see what's to follow, and more to analyze and talk about as we get closer towards the new season. Thanks, and please like and subscribe if you want to hear some more insights. Cheers, bye. Oh, and David Raya, I don't get it. So Arsenal are fine to have on loan a keeper from a mid-table Premier League team to be their number one. Somebody that I don't find physically commanding. He's too small. He seems to be totally absent on set pieces. I don't think that he's an exceptional shot stopper whatsoever. I think he's actually quite terrible with the ball at his feet. I really don't get it. I think he's played us into problems multiple times. And I'm nervous anytime the ball's near him. I just don't get it.